What I found in South Africa among people of all backgrounds and in the government was a strong commitment to the common good. Now, what makes their commitment so remarkable is that unlike the pilgrims on the Mayflower, who came to these shores and created a compact to support the common good, the Pilgrims were a relatively homogeneous group. South Africans are not only a rainbow of colors and cultures, but they have a terrible history of atrocities and betrayal and dehumanization against one another. So to affirm the common good of all people in the aftermath of such brutality is a rare human achievement, and it is one that we in this country could learn from. Ubuntu involves a faith that when one person's situation improves, we all gain. And when one person is tortured or persecuted, we are all diminished by it. On my trip, I had the honor of touring Robben's Island, the infamous dungeon built to stifle the spirit of freedom, where Nelson Mandela was imprisoned for many of his 27 years in prison. One of his former cellmates, Eddie Daniels, gave us a very rare and personalized tour. I saw the tiny, cold cell where Mandela lived and the horrible conditions that he endured. After almost 3 decades imprisoned for his political beliefs, after having witnessed countless atrocities, after being forced to miss out on the raising of his own children, after so much, Nelson Mandela and others might have called for vengeance and retribution. But in the spirit of Ubuntu, they called for forgiveness instead. Think about that. Decades of enduring deception, lies, and secrecy gave them a drive for truth. Generations of struggle and division gave them a desire for reconciliation, not revenge. And due to this kind of leadership, those years of incredible hostility were met with astonishing hospitality. With the aid of Bishop Desmond Tutu, they created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It was based on a simple yet profound truth. Perpetrators had to tell the truth, the whole truth, in exchange for amnesty, and victims were given the chance to forgive. One story from the commission is recounted in the book Rumors of Another World. It describes a policeman named Vanderbrock, who tells how he and his fellow officers shot an 18-year-old youth, then burnt the body. 8 years later, they went back, took the father, and forced his wife to watch as he was incinerated. The wife was in court to hear the confession and was asked by the judge what she wanted. She said she wanted Vanderbrock to go to the place where they burned her husband's body and gather up the dust and any bones so that she could give him a decent burial. Vanderbrock agreed. And she then added a further request. Mr. Vanderbrock took all my family away from me, and I still have a lot of love to give. Twice a month, I would like for him to come to the ghetto and spend a day with me so I can be a mother to him. And I would like Mr. Vanderbrock to know that he is forgiven by God and that I forgive him too. And I would like to embrace him so that he can know my forgiveness is real. And as the elderly woman made her way to the witness stand, Vanderbrock fainted, overwhelmed. Overwhelmed, no doubt, by her love in the face of his brutality. Overwhelmed by the mercy of people who he had treated like animals. Many of the stories of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission include horrific atrocities. And certainly not all the victims were as forgiving as the woman in that story. The process was incredibly painful as people spoke about it, and many stories remain untold. However, the process has allowed the people to begin to bury their bones and to seek a future together. In the years following his release, many people asked Mandela how he was able to overcome the bitterness that he must have felt and offer such positive leadership like the world has not seen before. And he said that it helped that there was so much important work to do. Now, I've been fascinated by Nelson Mandela for a long time, and that's one of the reasons why this trip to South Africa was so meaningful for me. I was in college at Tulane University during the 80s and the height of the anti-apartheid movement here in the U.S. And I was among a group of students who was appalled and incensed by the reports that we were hearing about apartheid and how it was affecting the people in South Africa. There was this worldwide movement that was being sparked by the African National Congress at the time to try to get institutions to divest from South Africa. You may remember. In the spring of 1988, I joined a group of student activists to try to get Tulane University to disclose whether they had investments in any companies doing business in South Africa, and if so, to divest. We held rallies on campus. We even sat in on one university board meeting. When the university refused to divest, a group of us built 3 very ugly shanty structures on the picturesque front lawn of the university, right on St. Charles in uptown New Orleans. We used old wood and broken scraps that we gathered along the banks of the Mississippi River. And of course, we spray painted "Free Nelson Mandela" and "Divest from South Africa" all over this makeshift shanty town. And we took turns inhabiting the structure 24 hours a day so that they could not be removed. We arranged for professors to come in and do teach-ins on the lawn in front of our little shanty town. And we put together a schedule of teachings and published that for the university to come. And eventually, 5 of the students decided to go on a hunger strike until the university agreed to divest. Now, I was not prepared to die for the cause at this point. So I was not one of those who went on a hunger strike, but I supported the students who did. The hunger strike brought us national attention as major newspapers began to run the story. And within a week, the university agreed to meet with our group, and by the end of the year, the university had divested all of its holdings connected to companies doing business in South Africa. We had won, and pretty soon, within a couple years, so had the anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. And Mandela and others credit the international pressure and sanctions as instruments to the eventual breakdown of the apartheid system. The movement, however, was not very popular when it began. Then President Ronald Reagan initially said that the call for sanctions and divestment from South Africa is an act of historic folly. And this opposition made activist movements like ours much more difficult. Now, I share this story this week because when I was standing there on Robben's Island in the prison, and the former prisoner and cellmate of Nelson Mandela, Eddie Daniels, looked at the group of us, he said, "Thank you." He said, "Thank you to all of you who worked from America and around the world to help us end apartheid." And at that moment, I felt a wave of connection. I think many of us there did, and that I could only describe as Ubuntu. In a way, he was saying, in part, because of me, he is who he is. And in the same vein, because of him, I am who I am. We had never met and are from different countries and different cultures. Yet in that moment, I realized that our humanity was intimately connected. Connected through a faith in freedom and justice. Connected through courage to do the right thing in the face of ridicule and powerful opposition.